Darius Foroux opens his philosophy with a simple but deeply powerful truth. Most people are busy, but very few are effective. In today's world, overflowing with tasks, notifications, pressures, and distractions, people confuse motion with progress. The modern individual often feels overwhelmed not because life is inherently complicated, but because attention is scattered in too many directions. Forrest argues that real improvement begins the moment you stop trying to do everything and instead direct your energy toward the few things that matter. This understanding sets the foundation for every lesson that unfolds in his writing. Focus is not merely a productivity tactic, it is a life strategy. If this is your first time, subscribe so you don't miss out. Let's continue. He emphasizes early that people often waste their most precious resource, not money, but attention, on things that deliver no growth, no fulfillment, and no long-term meaning. One of the lessons embedded in this idea is that not all tasks, desires, or obligations are created equal. Some actions move you forward, while others keep you in place. People in the United States, for example, often find themselves trapped in busyness cycles, answering emails, jumping between apps, constantly multitasking, while believing they are accomplishing meaningful work. Yet countless American workers report greater exhaustion despite longer hours, illustrating that scattered attention produces shallow results. Meanwhile, globally in countries like Japan, Germany, or South Korea, cultural expectations of diligence and productivity often lead to long workdays. But even there, rising awareness of burnout has taught many that effort without direction is neither sustainable nor effective. The lesson here is straightforward. When your attention is fragmented, your potential becomes fragmented too. This naturally leads Forrest to his next principle. Clarity is the beginning of focus. Without knowing what matters, you cannot prioritize it. He encourages people to question their motives and ask, "What do I actually want?" rather than "What should I be doing?" The distinction is crucial. Many people chase goals inherited from family, society, or the culture around them, without ever examining whether those goals align with their own values. In America, millions pursue career paths, degrees, or lifestyles because they believe these symbolize success, even when such pursuits bring stress rather than satisfaction. On the global stage, young professionals in highly competitive cultures like India or China often find themselves caught in achievement loops, excelling academically, securing prestigious jobs, and climbing ladders without ever stopping to ask whether these goals reflect their true desires. Embedded in these patterns is a lesson Forrest repeats through his work. Clarity protects you from wasting years on the wrong priorities. Once clarity begins to form, Forrest explains that focus requires deliberate subtraction. People often try to add productivity hacks, new routines, more tasks, and more commitments to their lives, believing improvement requires accumulation. In truth, the most effective people simplify. They remove distractions, obligations, and draining habits. This lesson echoes the lives of those who have transformed their circumstances by choosing less instead of more. Consider the example of American investor Warren Buffett, who is famous for maintaining a short list of top priorities and ignoring everything else. He attributes much of his success not to what he did, but to what he didn't do. Globally, you see similar patterns among innovators like Jack Ma or African entrepreneurs scaling businesses with limited resources. They learn early to avoid scattering attention across countless opportunities and instead commit to a small number of meaningful actions. The embedded lesson is powerful. You make room for what matters by letting go of what doesn't. After emphasizing subtraction, Forrest moves to a related but deeper insight. Most distractions are self-created. It is tempting to blame technology, society, or others for lack of focus, but Forrest argues that distraction begins internally. When people feel anxious, uncertain, or bored, they instinctively reach for escape. Social media, television, unnecessary errands, or meaningless tasks. The distraction serves a deeper purpose. It protects them from confronting discomfort. This mirrors modern American behavior. Hours lost scrolling, binge-watching, or switching tasks to avoid challenging or emotionally uncomfortable work. Globally, the same pattern appears in rising digital dependency, especially among young adults who increasingly spend 5 to 9 hours daily on their phones. The lesson embedded here is uncomfortable but essential. You cannot focus on what matters until you stop using distractions to avoid what matters. Foroux then explains that the mind becomes clearer when life becomes simpler. In his writing, he often states that simplicity is a choice made repeatedly. Every day, a person encounters demands, messages, and expectations, and each moment offers a decision: respond to everything, or selectively engage in what aligns with your vision. This idea mirrors timeless principles in Stoic philosophy and modern psychology, but is especially significant today. In countries like the United States, where consumer culture emphasizes accumulation and constant activity, simplicity becomes an act of resistance, a deliberate rejection of chaos. Globally, minimalism movements in Scandinavia, Japan, and parts of Africa demonstrate that reducing possessions and commitments leads to peace, productivity, and fulfillment. The lesson embedded in these examples is that simplicity creates space for thinking, for healing, for intention, and for meaningful work. Once people begin simplifying their lives, they naturally arrive at another principle. Focus strengthens identity. You become what you repeatedly do. When you consistently direct attention toward meaningful actions, your craft, your health, your relationships, your goals, your identity evolves. In the U.S., countless people reinvent their lives by consistently showing up for what matters, whether building businesses, improving their fitness, learning new skills, or nurturing healthier relationships. Globally, you see similar transformations in communities where individuals commit to small, daily improvements that accumulate over time. Foroux shows that the reverse is also true. Scattered attention leads to scattered identity, producing people who feel lost, overwhelmed, or disconnected from themselves. The embedded lesson is powerful. Focus isn't just about productivity. It's about becoming someone you're proud of. With identity grounded in focused action, Foroux transitions to another major insight. Doing less allows you to do better. Deep work requires time, energy, and attention. When tasks are rushed or stacked on top of one another, quality collapses. This matches research in American workplaces showing how multitasking reduces performance, increases errors, and leads to chronic stress. In the global economy, companies that prioritize deep work over frantic busyness, such as those in the Netherlands that emphasize balanced work-life structures, or Japanese firms that prioritize craftsmanship, achieve higher levels of innovation and excellence. Foroux's lesson is simple: excellence cannot emerge from chaos. Another interconnected lesson emerges. Consistency is more powerful than intensity. Many people rely on bursts of motivation, but motivation is unreliable. Focused living demands consistency, steady, deliberate action repeated daily. In the United States, you see this principle clearly among individuals who build financial freedom, fitness habits, or long-term skills. Their success doesn't come from extraordinary days, but from ordinary days repeated with discipline. Globally, consistent routines characterize the lives of top performers, from Kenyan marathon runners to Japanese artisans to European researchers. Foroux embeds this lesson through repeated emphasis. Small, consistent inputs produce extraordinary long-term outputs. As consistency grows, Foroux introduces another essential idea. Progress accelerates when you eliminate friction. Friction refers to anything that slows down or interrupts meaningful work. Mental clutter, emotional baggage, disorganized environments, toxic relationships, unclear priorities. By removing friction, people make focus the default instead of the exception. In the U.S., millions of people declutter their workspaces, restructure their schedules, or adjust their social circles to support healthier, more focused living. Globally, productivity methods like the Swedish lagom or Japanese kaizen illustrate how reducing friction within environments increases clarity and performance. The embedded lesson is practical. Make it easier to do the right things and harder to do the wrong things. At this point in the book's conceptual arc, Foroux ties the lessons together by addressing an underlying reality. Focus is a form of personal freedom. When you decide what matters and commit to it, you are no longer pulled in every direction by impulse, expectation, or chaos. You regain autonomy. In American culture, shaped heavily by consumerism, relentless media, and constant noise, freedom through focus becomes especially valuable. offering relief from pressures that cause anxiety and overwhelm. Around the world, in countries with fast-growing economies or rapidly changing social structures, focus allows individuals to carve clear paths despite external uncertainty. The lesson is deeply empowering. Your ability to focus gives you the power to shape the direction of your life. As the insights deepen, Foroux introduces a principle that becomes a backbone for focused living. Your habits reveal what you truly value, not what you claim to value. Many people say they want to grow, improve, or achieve greatness, yet their daily actions reflect comfort, distraction, and avoidance. Foroux stresses that transformation begins when your actions align with your intentions. In the modern American lifestyle, countless people express a desire for better health, stronger relationships, or financial improvement, but struggle to redirect their habits from convenience and distraction toward discipline and purpose. For example, despite widespread knowledge about diet and exercise, the majority of health decline in the U.S. stems not from lack of information, but from habits that contradict personal goals. Globally, similar habits appear in fast-expanding cities from Nairobi to Sao Paulo, where convenience culture competes with disciplined routines. Embedded here is the lesson that real priorities are visible in behavior, not words, and the person who learns to align both gains immense clarity. This leads naturally into Foroux's insistence on making deliberate choices rather than emotional ones. He explains that emotions make poor leaders. They're reactive, inconsistent, and often irrational. Most distractions succeed because they appeal to emotional comfort, boredom, anxiety, curiosity, escapism. In contrast, meaningful work demands rational, purpose-driven choices. In American workplaces, the difference between reactive employees and intentional ones is often the difference between stagnation and advancement. People who choose what matters, even when they don't feel like it, build reputations for reliability and excellence. Globally, business leaders who focus on long-term strategy rather than short-term emotional impulses outperform peers in volatile markets. The embedded lesson is simple but transformative. You become effective when you choose based on purpose rather than feeling. Once individuals begin making rational choices consistently, they encounter another critical lesson. Discipline is the gateway to freedom. At first glance, discipline feels restrictive, but Foroux argues that it is actually liberating. The disciplined person has control over their days, their mind, and their direction. Americans who practice disciplined financial habits, saving consistently, investing responsibly, avoiding lifestyle inflation, achieve long-term freedom even if their income is average. Similarly, globally, communities that practice structured habits, such as Scandinavian countries with disciplined social systems, or Asian communities that emphasize study routines, achieve stability and prosperity across generations. The lesson woven here is profound. Focused disciplines, repeated daily, create long-term liberation from stress, chaos, and regret. From the foundation of discipline emerges a core Foroux theme. The quality of your decisions determines the quality of your life. Every choice, no matter how small, compounds over time. Foroux emphasizes that people underestimate the long-term consequences of repeated actions, both good and bad. In the United States, the difference between someone who spends 2 hours a day watching TV and someone who spends those same hours learning a valuable skill compounds massively over 10 years. Globally, individuals who make consistently small, positive decisions, reading daily, exercising regularly, nurturing meaningful relationships, experience exponential personal growth. The embedded lesson is that good lives are built on good decisions, and good decisions are built on clarity and focus. This naturally leads to Foroux's next insight. High-leverage activities produce disproportionate results. Not every action yields equal value. Some tasks produce minimal impact while others generate outsized returns. Focused individuals learn to identify the few actions that produce the greatest outcomes. In the U.S., entrepreneurs who focus on high-leverage moves, building core products, strengthening relationships, improving systems, succeed far more quickly than those caught in perpetual low-impact work. Globally, businesses in fast-growing markets who adopt high-leverage strategies, such as automation, digital tools, or skill specialization, grow faster with fewer resources. The lesson embedded here is essential. Focusing on what matters includes choosing activities that multiply your effort instead of merely consuming it. With leverage established, Foroux introduces a counterbalancing truth. You must accept that you cannot do everything, and that saying no is essential for progress. Many people feel guilty declining requests, invitations, or opportunities, fearing they might disappoint others or miss out. But Foroux argues that a yes to one thing is a no to something else, often to the very things that matter most. In American corporate culture, professionals who master the skill of strategic refusal protect their time, avoid burnout, and maintain high performance. Globally, leaders and creators who guard their time fiercely, such as successful African tech founders or European innovators, achieve more because they do less but do it with full intention. The lesson here is that your life improves every time your no protects your focus. Once people learn to say no, they begin to experience an important shift. Focus demands boundaries, not just with tasks, but with people. Relationships can uplift or drain energy, and Foroux stresses that surrounding yourself with compatible people is essential for clarity. In the U.S., lifestyle researchers often emphasize the importance of social environments in shaping habits, finding that individuals who associate with healthy, productive, supportive peers develop similar traits. Globally, from Latin American communities to European cities, people embedded in supportive networks experience greater well-being, stronger mental resilience, and higher achievement. The lesson interwoven here is bold but true. Protecting your focus sometimes requires reducing access to people who sabotage it. This necessity for boundaries transitions into an equally powerful lesson. Your environment shapes your behavior more than your willpower does. Foroux underscores that willpower is a limited resource. Even motivated people get derailed when their environment is cluttered, chaotic, or filled with distractions. In American homes and workplaces, cluttered digital and physical environments correlate strongly with stress and productivity decline. Globally, minimalist and organized environments, seen in Scandinavian design, Japanese tidying philosophies, or even the structured layouts in many African tech hubs, create space for clear thinking and focused action. The embedded lesson is that if you want to change your life, begin by changing your environment. With environment addressed, Foroux begins discussing a deeper internal shift. Focused living requires self-awareness. Many people function on autopilot, reacting rather than acting, following routines without questioning them. Foroux stresses the importance of examining one's habits, triggers, and emotional patterns. Americans practicing mindfulness, therapy, or reflection exercises often experience major improvements in clarity and stress management. Globally, meditation traditions in India, mindfulness practices in Thailand, and reflective self-study in various cultures demonstrate the universal power of awareness. The embedded lesson: you cannot focus on what matters until you understand what distracts you, what motivates you, and what drives your behavior. As self-awareness deepens, another lesson becomes obvious. Your time is finite, so treat it like the precious resource it is. Foroux explains that many people live as if time is abundant, wasting days on activities that offer no growth, spending years on jobs or relationships that do not align with their values, or delaying meaningful goals until someday. In American culture, the cost of wasted time is often highlighted through stories of individuals who reach midlife feeling unfulfilled because they spent decades chasing external validation. Globally, similar patterns appear in societies where survival or social pressure often push individuals away from their true passions. Foroux ties these examples into one powerful lesson. When you respect your time, you automatically respect your life. From valuing time emerges another central idea. Your future depends on your daily systems, not your occasional efforts. People often rely on inspiration, waiting for the perfect moment to begin a project or change their life. Foroux emphasizes that systems, consistent habits, reliable routines, structured priorities create long-term success. American companies that build systematic workflows outperform those that rely solely on talent or passion. Globally, nations known for structured systems, like Switzerland, Singapore, and South Korea, demonstrate how consistent processes outperform sporadic bursts of effort. The lesson embedded here is foundational. Systems lead to predictability. Predictability leads to progress, and progress leads to mastery. As individuals begin developing better systems, Foroux introduces a related concept. Focus requires eliminating indecision. Indecision is costly. It drains time, mental energy, and emotional stability. People who linger too long between choices end up paralyzed. Foroux argues that clarity improves when decisions are made quickly and confidently, especially when no amount of additional information will drastically change the outcome. In the U.S., leadership training programs often emphasize rapid, informed decision-making as a key indicator of success. Globally, in fast-moving industries like African fintech or Asian e-commerce, leaders thrive when they make timely decisions rather than perfect ones. The embedded lesson is that decisiveness makes room for momentum, and momentum sustains focus. Once decisiveness is strengthened, Foroux addresses a hindrance that sabotages countless individuals. Perfectionism is the enemy of progress. Many people hesitate to start because they want everything to be flawless. But perfectionism delays action, and delayed action kills momentum. Americans pursuing creative projects, new careers, or entrepreneurial ventures often stall because they fear judgment or failure. Globally, people across cultures struggle with the same challenge, especially in environments where societal expectations are high. Foroux illustrates that perfectionism is simply procrastination in disguise. The lesson woven here is liberating. Done is better than perfect, because finished work creates real progress. With the threat of perfectionism exposed, Foroux moves to the next logical step. Action creates clarity. Many people assume the reverse, that clarity must come before action. But Foroux argues that doing the work reveals what matters. When Americans start businesses, switch careers, or learn new skills, clarity emerges as they experiment, fail, and adjust. Globally, entrepreneurs, students, and creators discover their best paths not through contemplation alone, but through engagement with the real world. The embedded lesson is that you cannot think your way into clarity. You must act your way into it. This insight carries directly into another. Momentum is a form of focus. Once you begin making progress, continuing becomes easier. Foroux emphasizes the importance of beginning with small actions that build confidence and rhythm. In the U.S., productivity experts often highlight the 2-minute rule or small start strategies that help people overcome inertia. Globally, micro-habits practiced in Japan, Chile, and Nigeria show that tiny steps performed daily transform lives over time. The embedded lesson is timeless. A small start is better than no start, because small steps compound into major results. What you focus on determines the quality of your life, but what you repeatedly focus on determines the direction of your life. People who devote attention to growth, health, meaningful relationships, and purposeful work build lives filled with richness and fulfillment. Those who focus on fears, distractions, or social comparison build lives filled with anxiety, emptiness, or regret. In America, the mental health impacts of digital overconsumption and comparison culture make this lesson even more relevant. Globally, societies navigating rapid technological change face similar challenges, illustrating that focus is not an American problem or an Eastern concern. It is a human struggle with universal consequences. The lesson emerging from all these patterns is that your focus is your compass, and every day, you are choosing your direction. As soon as a person begins guarding their attention and energy with intentionality, something subtle but powerful takes place. Clarity begins to sharpen, and the once blurry edges of life start to take shape. Darius Foroux argues that clarity is not a luxury, but the foundation upon which meaningful action rests. Without clarity, people drift. With clarity, people direct. And directing your life becomes the bridge between focusing on what matters and eliminating what doesn't. This is why Foroux emphasizes that clarity grows in environments of stillness, reflection, and honest self-evaluation, something many people today actively avoid because silence often forces them to confront their real issues. Yet avoiding these confrontations keeps them stuck. In recent times, the global rise of minimalism, digital detoxes, and slow living trends illustrate this hunger for clarity. Many people around the world are discovering that reducing noise and commitments is not about doing less. It is about seeing more. In the United States, a 2023 workplace survey showed that employees who practiced simple weekly reflection sessions, 15 minutes of reviewing priorities, reported significantly lower stress and 23% higher clarity in decision-making. Meanwhile, in Asia and parts of Europe, productivity tools that encourage slow, deliberate planning rather than speed are gaining ground. These examples affirm Forous's point. Clarity is not random, it is created. And once clarity is created, the next lesson emerges naturally: prioritization. Foroux argues that life becomes infinitely simpler when people stop treating all tasks as equal. Not everything deserves time. Not everything deserves attention. Not everything deserves worry. Yet most people distribute their time as if everything matters equally, which leads to exhaustion and disappointment. The discipline of prioritization separates the important from the urgent, the meaningful from the trivial, and the impactful from the distracting. Foroux teaches that prioritizing means choosing what deserves your best effort and consciously giving less, sometimes zero, effort to the rest. This lesson became especially clear during the global shift to remote work following the pandemic. Employees who learned to prioritize thrived, while those who tried to multitask and tackle everything at once experienced burnout. A 2022 report from Microsoft found that the most successful remote workers were those who identified 3 mission-critical tasks per day and dedicated uninterrupted blocks of time to them. This aligns seamlessly with Forous's teaching that productivity is the art of doing the right things, not the most things. When people narrow their focus, their results expand. But prioritization requires courage. And courage leads to the next insight: the courage to say no. Foroux stresses that saying no is one of the highest forms of self-respect. Every yes is a withdrawal from your energy bank. Every no is a deposit. People often say yes out of fear: fear of missing out, fear of disappointing others, fear of judgment. Yet this fear-based living becomes the very chain that binds them to mediocrity. High achievers, Foroux notes, are marked not by how much they accept, but by how much they refuse. They understand that refusing the wrong opportunities protects the right ones. In the American entrepreneurial landscape, stories of successful founders often highlight this principle. For example, Airbnb's founders famously rejected several side projects and consulting offers in the early days to focus exclusively on their core idea. Globally, companies like Spotify, Shopify, and even small startup teams have embraced ruthless prioritization, an intentional commitment to avoid pursuing more than 1 or 2 major goals at once. Foroux would argue that their results show how powerful a well-placed no can be. However, saying no is only effective when one understands what truly matters, which leads naturally to the practice of alignment. According to Foroux, alignment is when values, actions, goals, and daily habits point in the same direction. When alignment exists, effort compounds. When alignment is absent, effort cancels itself out. This explains why many hardworking people still feel stuck. They are busy, but their busyness isn't pointed toward anything meaningful. They are climbing a ladder leaning against the wrong wall. Real-life examples of misalignment appear everywhere. The employee who works 60-hour weeks, but says their family is their priority. The entrepreneur who claims to value their health, but sacrifices sleep to chase numbers. The student who wants deep learning but spends hours scrolling through social media. Forous's teaching is clear. Misalignment is self-inflicted sabotage. But alignment, once established, becomes a superpower because it turns identity into action and action into progress. In recent years, many Americans have begun restructuring their lives to achieve better alignment. The Great Resignation showed millions of people leaving jobs that conflicted with their values or mental health priorities. Globally, countries like Denmark, Finland, and New Zealand have become models of alignment-based cultures where work-life balance, intentional living, and value-driven decisions are the norm rather than the exception. These shifts reflect Forous's idea that alignment is not just personal, it is cultural and societal. With alignment comes the ability to execute effectively, leading to the next lesson: consistency. Foroux argues that consistency is the silent force behind every meaningful transformation. People often overestimate what they can accomplish in a week and underestimate what they can accomplish in a year of steady effort. The world rewards consistency far more than bursts of inspiration. Talent creates potential, consistency fulfills it. The habit of showing up daily, even when motivation is low, even when no one is watching, becomes the difference between dreamers and achievers. This truth is seen in countless global success stories. Content creators who produce regularly outperform more talented individuals who publish sporadically. Entrepreneurs who refine their systems weekly outperform those who chase shiny new ideas. Athletes, writers, coders, investors. Almost every field shows the same pattern. Small, consistent steps outperform occasional dramatic ones. In America, authors like James Clear have popularized the concept of atomic habits, while Foroux presents it through the lens of intentional focus. Both perspectives highlight the compounding nature of consistency, a force that transforms ordinary people into extraordinary performers when applied long enough. But consistency also requires resilience, the ability to stay focused despite obstacles. And so Foroux transitions into one of his most powerful themes: eliminating excuses. Excuses disguise themselves as rationalizations, but they are often fear dressed as logic. People blame time, circumstances, upbringing, economy, talent, or lack of resources. Yet Foroux emphasizes that excuses are seductive traps that prevent personal growth. Every excuse accepted becomes a limitation reinforced. Every excuse rejected becomes a door to progress. Recent global events highlight this deeply. During the rise of remote learning, some students claimed they couldn't study without in-person classes. Others adapted, organized digital study groups, and even performed better academically. In entrepreneurship, countless businesses shut down due to economic uncertainty, but many others pivoted, embraced digital strategies, and expanded. From local restaurants in New York transitioning to online delivery systems to African small businesses using WhatsApp and Instagram to sustain their customer base, the differentiator was not resources but mindset. Foroux would argue that excuses fail, but disciplined adaptation wins. And with excuses removed, individuals naturally begin to develop the next essential trait: self-discipline. Foroux describes self-discipline not as punishment, but as self-protection. It is the act of creating structure around what matters most. Without discipline, even the best intentions collapse under pressure or distraction. With discipline, even small efforts accumulate into significant achievements. The disciplined person is not controlled by moods or circumstances. They are guided by values and systems. Around the world, disciplined individuals stand out not because they are smarter or more gifted, but because they consistently do what others avoid. American investors who dollar-cost average into the stock market, athletes who maintain training schedules regardless of weather, professionals who develop morning routines that protect their mental clarity. Their success is the predictable outcome of disciplined action. Foroux's core message is that discipline transforms focus from a concept into a lifestyle. As discipline strengthens, it often reveals something deeper: purpose. Purpose is the long-term force that keeps people aligned when life becomes challenging. Foroux argues that purpose clarifies decisions, simplifies priorities, and eliminates distractions by providing a stable internal compass. Without purpose, even major achievements feel hollow. With purpose, even small steps feel meaningful. Globally, we see purpose-driven behavior shaping modern society. Nonprofit organizations, mission-driven startups, and social enterprises are gaining traction because people want their work to matter beyond making money. In the United States, millennials and Gen Z increasingly prioritize meaningful work over high salaries. Globally, the rise of sustainability initiatives, mental health advocacy, and social justice movements show that people want to connect their actions to something greater than themselves. Foroux's emphasis on purpose echoes this worldwide shift toward meaningful living. Purpose then leads to the next idea: contribution. Foroux suggests that focusing on what matters ultimately expands beyond self-improvement and becomes about adding value to others. Growth feels complete only when shared. The most fulfilled individuals are often those who give freely: knowledge, mentorship, kindness, creativity, solutions. Contribution creates connection, and connection creates meaning. Recent global movements reinforce this point. During crises, communities that supported one another recovered faster. American cities that embraced volunteer programs saw stronger social cohesion. Globally, individuals using social media to educate, support, and uplift others gained influence not through self-promotion, but through genuine contribution. Foroux would argue that contribution transforms focus from personal gain to collective elevation. And as contribution increases, the final layer of focus becomes evident: peace. Foroux teaches that peace is not the absence of problems, but the presence of alignment, clarity, discipline, and purpose working together. Peace grows when people focus on what matters and release what is not. It becomes the quiet reward of a well-lived life. As peace begins to settle into a person's life, Foroux explains that something remarkable occurs. The mind becomes sharper, decisions become cleaner, and emotional turbulence decreases. Peace is not passive, it is a form of power. It gives a person the ability to think clearly without being shaken by every external event. In a world overflowing with noise, opinions, and constant triggers, individuals who cultivate inner peace gain a competitive advantage. They become less reactive, more intentional, and significantly more capable of long-term thinking, a rare skill in modern times. This is why Foroux stresses that peace is not achieved by accident. It is earned by consistently focusing on what matters, day after day. Peace grows when the mind is not pulled in 20 different directions. Peace grows when a person no longer carries unnecessary mental burdens, grudges, regrets, comparisons, approval-seeking, and the never-ending fear of missing out. Each time a person releases one of these burdens, they reclaim a piece of their mental freedom. And mental freedom is the ultimate currency of modern life. The global mental health landscape in recent years reinforces this truth. Anxiety levels continue to rise worldwide, especially among young adults, not because life is harder than before, but because the mind is more cluttered than ever. In the United States, psychologists report that people who practice focused living, simplified routines, boundaries around digital use, intentional solitude, and deep work habits experience significantly lower levels of anxiety and distraction. Across Europe and Asia, the rise of mindfulness and minimalistic living reflects a collective desire for mental clarity. Peace has become a necessity, not a luxury. Yet peace is fragile without emotional intelligence. Foroux makes a clear point. To focus on what matters, one must manage emotions effectively. Emotional intelligence gives a person the ability to process feelings without being controlled by them. Without emotional intelligence, distractions erupt from within: frustration, fear, impatience, and insecurity. Many people think their problem is external noise, but more often it is internal noise. Learning to interpret emotions rather than suppress them empowers individuals to stay aligned with their priorities even in stressful situations. In real life, consider how leaders around the world navigated the pandemic years. Those who remained emotionally steady were able to make rational decisions despite uncertainty. American CEOs who fostered calmness in their teams saw productivity stabilize faster. Globally, leaders who acknowledged emotional realities, rather than pretending everything was fine, built trust and resilience. These examples mirror Forouz's belief that emotional steadiness enhances focus because it reduces the internal friction that drains mental energy. Once emotional intelligence strengthens, an individual becomes capable of one of the most transformative habits Foroux teaches: deliberate decision-making. Many people think they make decisions consciously, but most decisions are actually reactive, rushed, or influenced by others' expectations. Foroux argues that the quality of a person's life is determined by the quality of their decisions. Clear thinking, calm emotions, and focused priorities enable better choices. Better choices create better habits. Better habits create better outcomes. The chain begins with decision-making. Around the world, decision fatigue has become a widely discussed topic. People are overwhelmed by options, from career paths to entertainment to lifestyle choices. In the U.S., a 2023 behavioral study showed that individuals who reduce unnecessary decisions, like minimizing wardrobe choices, automating bill payments, or standardizing morning routines, conserve mental energy for higher-value decisions. Globally, successful entrepreneurs and creators follow similar patterns. Fewer decisions about the trivial, more decisions about the meaningful. This is the heart of Forouz's message: simplify the decision landscape, amplify the results. Good decision-making becomes easier with the next practice Foroux highlights: long-term thinking. Long-term thinkers focus on effort that compounds, not effort that merely satisfies temporary urges. They resist impulsiveness because they see beyond the immediate moment. They don't measure progress day to day, but year to year. Long-term thinking helps people avoid traps like comparison, competition for validation, and chasing short-lived pleasures. In the American investment world, long-term thinking is the philosophy that built the wealth of people like Warren Buffett. Globally, long-term thinkers dominate industries that require patience: technology, real estate, education, and health. When people choose the long-term view, distractions lose their power because distractions thrive on immediacy. Working toward a future goal kills the impulse to chase everything shiny in the present. But long-term thinking is only meaningful if paired with learning. This leads Foroux into another central insight: the power of continuous self-education. He argues that focusing on what matters requires constant learning because the world is dynamic, and yesterday's knowledge cannot solve tomorrow's problems. Learning is leverage. The more you learn, the more effective your actions become. And in a world saturated with information, disciplined reading and selective learning are the differentiators. Recent global trends confirm this. Online learning platforms exploded in popularity, with people from Africa, Asia, Europe, and the Americas gaining access to knowledge previously limited to universities or wealthy institutions. In the U.S., workers who embraced continuous learning during layoffs or market shifts were the first to bounce back with better skills and stronger resilience. Foroux's belief aligns with this era. Learning is no longer optional for those who want to focus on what matters. It is essential. Learning then naturally leads to the next crucial topic: skill building. Foroux is clear that valuable skills create freedom. When people develop rare and useful skills, they gain control over their career, income, and opportunities. But skill building requires sustained focus. It cannot happen when the mind is constantly split between distractions. A focused individual becomes a skillful individual, and a skillful individual becomes a valuable one. This truth is visible worldwide. Software developers who spent consistent hours refining their craft now work remotely for global companies. Creatives who practiced daily overcame competitors who relied only on talent. American workers who learned digital skills after the pandemic opened new career doors. Globally, skill-based migration patterns show that countries compete for individuals with specialized abilities. Skills build mobility, resilience, and security, precisely the rewards Foroux associates with focusing on what matters. Skill building eventually leads people to understand the next principle: the importance of systems. Foroux teaches that you do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. Systems are repeatable processes that guarantee action even when motivation fades. A person who relies on motivation will always struggle because motivation fluctuates. But a person who relies on systems becomes unstoppable. Consider how athletes, world-class chefs, software teams, or financial traders operate. They don't rely on willpower. They rely on routines, checklists, structures, and frameworks. In America, productivity consultants often say, "You don't need more discipline, you need better systems." Globally, the highest performing professionals across industries follow daily systems that support their goals. Systems reduce cognitive load, making focus easier and more automatic. But systems alone cannot protect focus without another essential habit: boundaries. Foroux argues that boundaries are the invisible fences that keep distractions out and priorities in. Without boundaries, other people's priorities invade your life. Boundaries protect time, energy, relationships, and mental clarity. Saying no becomes easier when boundaries exist. Productivity becomes more natural. The mind becomes calmer because chaos no longer dictates the rhythm of life. Recent global experiences highlight the importance of boundaries. Remote workers without clear boundaries saw burnout skyrocket, while those who set firm digital and time boundaries maintained stability. In America, establishing do not disturb hours increased work-life balance. In Europe, many countries even passed laws giving workers a legal right to disconnect from work communication outside office hours. These examples mirror Forouz's emphasis. Boundaries are not barriers. They are bridges to a focused life. Once boundaries are established, the next transformation emerges: intentional living. People stop simply existing and begin designing their days. They question habits, challenge assumptions, redesign routines, and audit their environment. Everything becomes purposeful: how they spend the morning, who they associate with, what information they consume, and how they manage downtime. Foroux emphasizes that an intentional life is a powerful life because randomness no longer dictates the outcome. Globally, intentional living has become a growing lifestyle movement. People declutter their homes, curate their digital lives, switch careers for meaning, relocate for peace, and redesign their social circles. Americans are increasingly moving away from hyper-consumerism toward intentional minimalism. In Asia and Europe, the rising popularity of quiet lifestyles shows the same shift. These trends echo Forous's belief that intentional living amplifies focus and eliminates emotional and mental waste. And finally, Foroux brings all these ideas to a single conclusion: a focused life is a meaningful life. When a person focuses on what matters, they experience deeper fulfillment, richer relationships, greater achievement, stronger peace, and a sense of direction that many spend their entire lives searching for. The purpose of focus is not productivity. The purpose of focus is living well. As the journey of focusing on what matters reaches its deepest layers, Foroux makes one truth unmistakably clear: a meaningful life is not built on intensity, but on intentionality. It is not about doing everything. It is about doing the right things. It is not about being everywhere. It is about being fully present where it counts. And it is not about chasing more. It is about pursuing better. This final shift, from a life of scattered effort to a life of concentrated purpose, is the core transformation Foroux wants every reader to experience. He argues that the modern world tricks people into believing that meaning will come from accumulation: more productivity, more achievements, more possessions, more recognition. Yet meaning rarely comes from more. Meaning comes from depth. It comes from pouring yourself into fewer things that matter more. It comes from choosing quality over quantity, clarity over chaos, and direction over distraction. This is why many people around the world, even those who seem successful by external standards, still feel a sense of emptiness. They have collected accomplishments, but they have not curated purpose. Foroux points out that focusing on what matters is ultimately about identity, not the identity society assigns, but the identity a person chooses. Every focused action reinforces a chosen identity. Every distraction reinforces a borrowed identity. When people choose their identity intentionally, their decisions begin to reflect it. If someone sees himself as a writer, he writes. If she sees herself as a healthy person, she eats and trains accordingly. Identity fuels focus, and focus strengthens identity. This cycle becomes self-reinforcing and deeply transformative. In recent times, you can see this in how many people globally are reinventing themselves. Workers are shifting industries. Creators are launching independent brands. Professionals are abandoning prestigious but unfulfilling careers for work they actually believe in. In the United States, the rise of second-act careers, people in midlife or retirement starting new endeavors, reflects a desire not just for income, but for identity that aligns with meaning. Across Africa, Europe, and Asia, millions are embracing creative entrepreneurship, remote work, small businesses, digital crafts, and value-driven projects because they want to work in ways that reflect who they truly are. Forous's philosophy aligns with this era of reinvention. To focus is to rediscover yourself. With identity clarified, people naturally begin to refine their relationships. Foroux argues that a large part of focusing on what matters means choosing relationships that nourish rather than drain. Some relationships bring clarity, inspiration, and growth. Others bring drama, distraction, and emotional fatigue. The people around you influence how you think, act, and feel. They shape your environment, your ambitions, and your emotional health. A focused life requires relationships that support the direction you are trying to move toward. Globally, this truth is visible in social trends. Many people are now curating smaller but more intentional social circles. There's a rising awareness that mental health is deeply tied to social environments. In America, mental health foundations highlight how the quality of one's relationships strongly predicts happiness, more than wealth, achievements, or career status. In Japan, Denmark, and Canada, research shows that communities with stronger social bonds report higher levels of life satisfaction. These patterns echo Forous's message. What matters is not how many people you know, but whether the people you know help you grow. But relationships alone cannot sustain focus unless paired with an aligned environment. Foroux emphasizes that environment is stronger than willpower. If your environment contradicts your goals, you will eventually lose. If your environment supports your goals, you will eventually win. This is because humans adapt to the spaces, habits, and systems around them. A distraction-filled environment breeds a distracted life. A meaningful environment breeds meaningful behavior. This is why many people redesign their living spaces, declutter their homes, filter social media feeds, organize their workspaces, or choose quieter neighborhoods when seeking deeper focus. In the United States, the minimalist movement, championed by creators like Joshua Fields Millburn and Ryan Nicodemus, exploded because people discovered that removing physical clutter improves mental clarity. Globally, Scandinavian design, Japanese Zen aesthetics, and digital detox retreats all represent the same pursuit, an environment that supports clarity and calm. Forous's principle is simple but powerful. Design your environment, or your environment will design you. As environment stabilizes and relationships deepen, Foroux introduces another transformative idea: intentional rest. Many people undermine their goals not because they lack discipline, but because they lack recovery. Rest is not the opposite of focus. Rest is fuel for focus. A mind that is constantly engaged eventually becomes dull. A mind that is periodically rested becomes sharper, more creative, and more resilient. Foroux argues that rest is a strategic investment, not a form of laziness. Across the world, you see this idea gaining traction. Elite athletes are now prioritizing rest days and sleep as fiercely as training routines. American companies embracing 4-day workweeks report equal or higher productivity. Japan, which struggled with extreme overwork culture, has introduced national initiatives promoting rest to combat burnout. The global recognition of burnout as a public health issue reinforces Forous's point. Without rest, focus collapses. Rest enhances the next critical component: presence. Foroux teaches that the ability to be fully engaged in the moment is one of the purest forms of focusing on what matters. Presence turns ordinary experiences into meaningful ones. Conversations become deeper, work becomes more satisfying, and life becomes more vivid. The modern world encourages divided attention, but divided attention leads to divided living. Presence turns life from something you rush through into something you inhabit. Presence is becoming a global priority. Mindfulness practices have surged across the United States, Europe, and Asia. Meditation apps like Calm and Headspace reach tens of millions of users because people want help in reclaiming presence. Schools in Canada and the US now teach mindfulness to students. In India and parts of Southeast Asia, ancient presence-based practices like yoga and breathwork are being adopted worldwide. This shift supports Forous's teaching that presence is not merely a spiritual idea. It is a practical tool for living well. And with presence comes gratitude, an emotional filter that amplifies what matters and minimizes what doesn't. Foroux explains that gratitude recalibrates the mind. When you are grateful, trivial annoyances lose their power. When you are grateful, internal clarity increases. When you are grateful, focus becomes easier because your mind is not constantly searching for what is missing. Gratitude grounds the heart in appreciation instead of dissatisfaction, a key ingredient of meaningful living. Global studies confirm this. American psychological research shows that people who practice daily gratitude experience lower stress, improved sleep, and stronger emotional resilience. In Europe, gratitude journals have become common tools in therapy. Globally, cultures rooted in spiritual practices, from Buddhist regions of Asia to indigenous communities in South America, have long embraced gratitude as a core principle of wellness. Forous's message echoes these ancient traditions. Gratitude multiplies meaning. The culmination of all these principles leads to Forous's final message: mastery over one's life. To focus on what matters is to reclaim ownership. It means not drifting, not reacting, not living on autopilot, not getting pulled into 1,000 directions by digital chaos, fear, comparison, or external noise. It means living intentionally rather than accidentally. A person who focuses on what matters becomes the author of their days, not a character in someone else's script. Mastery is not perfection. Mastery is alignment. It is the ability to consistently return to clarity, purpose, and meaningful action even when life becomes difficult. It is the ability to choose long-term fulfillment over short-term distraction. It is the ability to design a life you can look back on with calm satisfaction rather than regret. Around the world, this desire for self-mastery has become a defining movement of our era. People are choosing careers that align with their values, downsizing their obligations, protecting their time, nurturing fewer but more authentic relationships, and redesigning their lifestyles around what they truly care about. This global shift reflects the very heart of Forouz's philosophy. The most meaningful life is the one crafted intentionally, guarded deliberately, and lived consciously. In the end, Forouz leaves readers with a simple but profound realization. Your life becomes what you focus on. It always has. It always will. Focus is not just a skill. It is a story you write with your daily choices. And when you choose to focus on what matters, everything else begins to fall into place. If this message resonated with you, subscribe and join us for more wisdom that fuels growth.